Mom had mentioned earlier that you'd be working late again tonight, Sophia said absent-mindedly, her fingers flying over the screen of her phone. The clock on the wall caught my eye. It was nearly 6. I'll try to wrap up earlier than usual, I said evenly, keeping my frustration in check. I'm putting in extra hours to save for your college fund, I added, hoping to impress the importance of my work. Sophia let out a sigh, the kind that made responsibilities seem like a burden. Yeah, I know, she replied flatly. After a pause, she added in an offhand manner, Mom thinks you're stressing out over money too much anyway. Her comment made me freeze in place. I set my coffee mug down carefully and looked at her. She said that? I asked, my voice steady but probing. Without looking up from her phone, Sophia gave a lazy shrug. Yeah, something like that. She mentioned it yesterday or something. She thinks I'm overdoing it for no reason? That we'd be fine if I scaled back? I pressed, trying to understand. Sophia shrugged again and added nonchalantly, Pretty much. We'd be fine, she said. Her words hit harder than I had anticipated, but I kept my response measured. It's not just about getting by. It's about securing your future, for things like college and emergencies, I explained, trying to make her understand. Okay, I get it, she said, cutting me off, clearly disinterested. She pushed her chair back, standing abruptly. Anyway, I have plans with Luna. Don't wait up for me. Wait, I said firmly, stopping her in her tracks. We already planned dinner tonight. And Luna? I thought you weren't talking after last week's fight. Sophia hesitated just for a moment before turning on her heel. We made up, she said briskly. Mom knows, and she's fine with it, okay? I opened my mouth to question her further, but stopped. There was something calculated about her response, a rehearsed edge to her tone. Still, I let it go. She was a teenager, after all, prone to half-truths and casual deflections. Just be home by 10, I called after her, as the door slammed shut behind her. Later that evening, the house was eerily quiet. I had finished my work early and found myself mindlessly flipping through TV channels, waiting for Rebecca to return from the errands she had mentioned earlier. Time dragged on, and her absence felt unusually long. The texts I sent went unanswered. At 9:30, the sound of her car pulling into the driveway shattered the stillness. Moments later, the front door opened and closed with a sharp thud, followed by the click of her heels on the tile floor. Hey, she greeted casually, setting a few shopping bags on the counter. Long day? Yeah, I replied, studying her closely. Where were you? Target, she answered without hesitation. They had a sale on home stuff, so I picked up a few things we needed. She began unpacking the bags, candles, cleaning supplies, and a random assortment of household items. Her movements were deliberate but lacked their usual warmth. I waited for her to meet my gaze, but she didn't. You didn't answer my texts, I said. She glanced up briefly and gave a quick, apologetic smile. Oh, sorry. My phone was buried in my purse. You know how it is. Something in her tone set me on edge. Sophia mentioned you think I'm too stressed about money, I said, watching for her reaction. Rebecca's hands paused briefly before continuing. She said that. Kids always twist things around. I just meant you should ease up sometimes. You work so hard and it's admirable, but I don't want you burning out. Her response was smooth, almost too smooth. The following day, as I worked from my home office, Sophia's voice carried through the house. She was on the phone, her tone light and carefree. Though I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, certain phrases caught my attention. I told you Dad doesn't notice anything, she said with a laugh. He's so busy working, he's clueless. The dismissiveness in her tone stung. I considered confronting her, but decided against it. Maybe it was just a phase, I told myself, a typical teenage rebellion. But a seed of doubt had been planted, and I couldn't shake it. That night, Rebecca came to bed late, her steps unsteady, the faint smell of wine lingering on her. Out with the girls again? I asked neutrally. Yeah, she murmured, her back to me. Just a quick drink to catch up. Nothing much. She drifted off quickly, her breathing evening out, but something felt off. Her explanations were growing vaguer, her demeanor more evasive. This wasn't like her. Lying awake, I replayed the subtle inconsistencies I had ignored for months, the extended errands, the missed calls, her defensiveness. By morning, I knew I had to dig deeper. I started small. While Rebecca showered, I glanced at her phone, noting a few unfamiliar names in her recent messages. I didn't open anything. Yet. Over the next few days, I paid closer attention. Every rushed phone call, every vague excuse, every distracted moment. The cracks in our routines were widening, and I could no longer convince myself that they weren't there. Something was wrong, and I needed to face it. I listened closely, letting each sound and detail settle into my mind, but nothing could have prepared me for what unfolded. The garage was still, the only noise the steady drip of a faucet I had just repaired. I stood, wiping my hands on a rag, satisfied with the small task completed. Sunday evenings were my retreat, a pocket of peace after a grueling week. But as I made my way toward the house, I froze in my tracks. Sophia's laughter floated on the air, catching me off guard. It wasn't her usual sarcastic chuckle, but something different. Light, unrestrained, almost joyful. Following it came a voice I didn't recognize, deep and unfamiliar, coming from the living room. My curiosity spiked. Who could she be talking to? Luna? Her best friend? No, this voice wasn't hers. It belonged to a boy. I moved closer, careful not to draw attention. The door was slightly ajar, just enough for me to hear while staying out of sight. Dad doesn't have the slightest idea about Mom's secret life, Sophia said, her voice dripping with confidence. My stomach churned. I leaned against the wall, trying to make sense of her words. Every Sunday, while Dad is too busy being oblivious, Mom takes us to see our half-siblings, she continued, her tone sharp with disdain. And her boyfriend? Massive upgrade. The guy drives a car Dad couldn't dream of affording, not even in 1,000 years of overtime. The boy chuckled softly. Are you serious? Completely clueless, Sophia replied smugly. I'm just waiting for Mom to end things for good so we can finally live like we deserve. With real money. This family? Dead weight. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I stood motionless, her voice cutting into me like shards of glass. Shock, fury, and disbelief swirled in my mind, my breath catching in my chest. Sophia's laugh pierced the silence again. Can you believe it? Dad's so dull, always going on about saving for college like that's all there is to life. Mom says it's pathetic. Once we're out of here, we'll finally have what we're entitled to. The boy whistled. Your mom's guy must be loaded if he's got a car like that. What does he do? Something with investments, I think, Sophia said dismissively. I just know he's 1,000,000 times better than Dad. Mom says it's only a matter of time before we leave for good. I couldn't bear to listen any longer. My fists clenched, and I forced myself to step away quietly. In the kitchen, I leaned against the counter, staring blankly ahead, the weight of her words pressing down on me. How long had this been happening? Was my entire life a lie? The betrayal burned deep. Rebecca's deceit was one thing, but Sophia's casual involvement, her smugness, cut even deeper. Her words echoed in my mind, feeding the growing storm within me. Footsteps approached, pulling me back to reality. I quickly masked my turmoil as Sophia walked in, phone in hand, her smirk still lingering. Hey, Dad, she said casually, as if everything were normal. Hey, I replied evenly, keeping my voice steady. You okay? She asked briefly, barely glancing up from her phone. Yeah, just fixed the faucet, I said, reaching for a glass to fill with water, my movements deliberate and controlled. Cool, she mumbled, already heading upstairs, her laughter from earlier ringing in my ears as I stood frozen, the untouched glass in my hand. I felt like the ground beneath me was crumbling, dragging me toward an abyss I couldn't escape. That night I sat in my office, staring blankly at the computer screen. Sophia's words replayed endlessly in my mind. Dad doesn't have a clue. Mom's secret life. Dead weight. I began typing, my fingers moving with a mechanical detachment. Divorce lawyers. Private investigators. I wasn't sure what I was searching for, only that I needed answers. Something to make sense of the chaos. The sound of the front door opening jolted me. Rebecca was home. I heard her light footsteps as she moved through the house, humming softly. I turned off the monitor and walked to the living room. Rebecca stood unpacking groceries, her expression calm, almost serene. "Hey," she greeted me with a smile. "You're still up?" "Yeah," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "How was your evening?" "Just running errands," she replied casually, placing a carton of eggs on the counter. "Nothing exciting." I studied her, scrutinizing her every movement as if it might betray the truth. "Everything okay?" she asked, glancing at me briefly. I nodded, my face a mask of calm. But inside, a storm raged on, relentless and unyielding. She noticed my gaze lingering on her and tilted her head slightly. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice tinged with curiosity. I forced a grin and shook my head. "Just feeling a bit worn out," I said. She gave a small nod, seeming to accept my response, and shifted her focus back to her task. Without saying another word, I slipped out of the room and returned to my office, closing the door softly behind me. Leaning against the door, I released a long, shaky breath. The weight pressing on my chest felt suffocating. I couldn't deny it any longer. Rebecca was keeping something from me, and Sophia knew more than she let on. But I wasn't as clueless as they thought. Not anymore. Sitting down at my desk, I felt a steely resolve take hold. They might have believed I was oblivious, but they were about to learn how wrong they were. Charging into a confrontation now would be pointless. My emotions, anger, hurt, betrayal, raged within me, but I kept them in check. Acting without concrete proof would accomplish nothing. Determined, I turned to my laptop. Suspicions wouldn't suffice. I needed irrefutable evidence. I started by combing through our bank records, examining every detail with meticulous care. What I uncovered left no room for doubt. Charges for lavish dinners at restaurants I'd never heard of, expensive purchases that had never appeared at home, and the most damning discovery: repeated transactions tied to a place called Carillon Suites. A quick search revealed it to be a luxury hotel across town, the kind of place people used to keep secrets, not share them. My fists clenched as the grim truth came into focus. Next, I turned my attention to her phone. Rebecca had a predictable habit of leaving it on the kitchen counter each night before bed. Waiting until her breathing turned soft and steady, I retrieved it as silently as possible. She hadn't even bothered to erase her texts, perhaps assuming I'd never dare to look. Each message between her and Jacob felt like a fresh stab to the chest. "Can't wait for Sunday. Miss you already. Last night was incredible. I'll tell him soon, I swear." The photos that followed twisted the knife. Smiling selfies of the two of them, his arm draped possessively around her shoulders, and a shot of him leaning against a flashy red sports car. The final, crushing blow was a time-stamped photo of Rebecca kissing him, taken just days earlier. My hands shook as I forwarded everything to my email before carefully returning the phone to its spot. This wasn't grief coursing through me. It was a tightly controlled fury. The next morning I rose early. Rebecca was already in the kitchen, humming softly as she cooked breakfast, her demeanor calm and cheerful. "Morning," she greeted, lifting the coffee pot. "Want some?" "No, I'm fine," I replied, my tone cold and distant. She didn't seem to notice, merely shrugging as if it were nothing. "Suit yourself. Busy day ahead?" "Something like that," I said, taking a seat at the table. Sophia wandered in shortly after, eyes glued to her phone as she shuffled to her usual spot. "Good morning," Rebecca chirped. "Morning," Sophia mumbled, barely lifting her head. She poured cereal into a bowl without enthusiasm. I studied her closely, searching for any hint of acknowledgement, but her face revealed nothing. "Plans for today?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "Going to Luna's," she answered quickly, still avoiding my gaze. I nodded, choosing not to push further. Neither of them had any inkling of what was coming. That evening I set my plan into motion. I sent Rebecca a text. "Let's have dinner tonight. Just us. I'll bring something nice." Her response was almost immediate. "Sounds wonderful. What time?" "7," I replied. Instead of picking up takeout, I spent the afternoon preparing. I gathered every piece of evidence, the bank statements, the messages, the photos, the receipts, and organized them neatly into a folder. After stopping to grab a cheap bottle of wine, I headed home. Rebecca was already seated at the table when I arrived, candles flickering around her. She greeted me with a warm smile. "You're in a romantic mood tonight," she teased as I set the wine down. "Something like that," I said, sitting across from her. She poured 2 glasses, handing one to me. "To us," she said, raising her glass. I clinked mine against hers but didn't drink. Instead, I placed the folder on the table between us. "What's this?" she asked, her smile fading as confusion flickered across her face. "Open it," I said, my voice steady. Her fingers trembled as she flipped through the pages. With each piece of evidence, her face grew paler. When she reached the photos, her voice cracked. "Where did you—" "It doesn't matter," I cut her off sharply. "I know everything." "Ethan," she began, her voice quivering. "I can explain—" "No," I interrupted, my tone cold and final. "You don't get to explain. You don't get to lie anymore." Tears welled in her eyes, but I felt nothing. No pity, no sorrow, only a searing anger that burned away everything else. "Was it worth it?" I asked, my voice low but filled with venom. "Was he worth it?" Her lips parted, but no words came out. Only silence. "For years you toyed with me," I said, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. "And worse, you involved our daughter in your lies. Did you really think I wouldn't uncover everything?" "Ethan, please," she murmured, tears streaming down her face. "I made a terrible mistake." "A mistake?" I echoed, my laughter sharp and cold. "Forgetting a birthday is a mistake. What you did was calculated. It was a betrayal." When she reached for my hand, I instinctively pulled away. "I can make this right," she begged, her voice cracking. "We can make this right." I stood, towering over her as my patience dissolved. "There's no coming back from this, Rebecca. I'm done." Her sobs filled the room as she buried her face in her hands. Without another word, I turned and left, her cries echoing behind me. That evening, Sophia stormed into my office, her face flushed with fury. "What the hell, Dad?" she shouted. "Excuse me?" I said, raising an eyebrow, startled by her intrusion. "Mom told me everything. How could you treat her like this?" "How could I treat her like this?" I countered, my tone measured but laced with steel. "You mean how could I hold her accountable? For lying? For cheating? For dragging this family through the mud?" "She made a mistake!" Sophia yelled, her voice rising. "Stop calling it a mistake!" I snapped, my voice turning ice cold. "And what about you? You laughed behind my back. You pretended I didn't notice. You were in on it, Sophia." Her anger faltered for a moment before she folded her arms defiantly. "Maybe if you weren't so dull, she wouldn't have looked elsewhere." Her words struck like a blow, but I refused to flinch. "You're just like her," I said quietly, each word deliberate. "Self-centered, entitled, blind to the harm you cause." She glared at me, then turned and stormed out, slamming the door with all her might. By the week's end, I filed for divorce. Rebecca begged, her voice trembling with desperation, but her tears meant nothing to me anymore. The damage was too profound to repair. Sophia sided with her mother, cutting off communication with me. I let her go without a fight. I no longer had room in my life for those who didn't value me. As the movers carried the last of my belongings out of the house, a strange sense of calm washed over me. The weight of the past lifted, and I felt ready to begin anew. The days that followed Rebecca's betrayal were marked by precision and determination. My emotions, once fiery and chaotic, hardened into a steady resolve. It wasn't about anger anymore. It was about control. Monday morning, I contacted the bank. "I need to separate my accounts," I stated firmly. "Are you certain? This will impact joint accounts and credit cards," the representative warned. "That's the idea," I replied curtly. By midday, my accounts were closed. My savings transferred to a new one under my name. Rebecca wouldn't realize until her next purchase failed. Tuesday evening, I began packing. I focused on essentials: clothes, important documents, and a few sentimental keepsakes. I avoided Rebecca and Sophia entirely, retreating to my office or the garage. Over dinner, Rebecca tried to engage me. "You've been quiet lately," she ventured. "Work's been hectic," I lied, not looking up from my plate. She seemed to accept it and turned her attention to Sophia, who was complaining about some trivial drama. On Wednesday, I found an apartment, a modest one-bedroom on the other side of town. It was far enough for a fresh start, but still practical. "It's available immediately," the landlord informed me. "Perfect," I said, shaking his hand. By that evening, I had utilities arranged and movers scheduled. When I returned home, Rebecca was already asleep. I stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her sleep peacefully, as though nothing had happened. It was a cruel illusion. Without a word, I walked away. Thursday, I contacted my lawyer. "I've compiled everything," I said. "Texts, photos, financial statements. It's all in your inbox." "This is strong," he replied, a hint of surprise in his voice. "I want the papers ready by tomorrow," I said, my tone leaving no room for debate. "They'll be ready," he assured me. By Friday morning, the house was silent. Rebecca and Sophia were still asleep as I placed the divorce papers on the kitchen counter, topped with a handwritten note. "You wanted change? Here it is. Best of luck with your choice." I stood there for a moment, letting the weight of my decision sink in. Then, without a second glance, I walked out, closing the door on that chapter of my life. A sense of finality hung in the air, like a weight pressing down, but not enough to crush me. Strangely, it felt liberating. With a suitcase in one hand and a box of personal belongings in the other, I stepped through the doorway. The soft, golden light of dawn washed over the neighborhood, casting it in hues of calm. For the first time in years, I felt like I could finally breathe. I didn't bother to look back. By the time Rebecca would find the papers, I was already unpacking in my new apartment. That afternoon, movers delivered the last of my possessions. As I sorted through boxes, my phone buzzed repeatedly with messages. I ignored them at first, fully aware of who was on the other end. Eventually, curiosity won out. Rebecca's messages were predictable. "Ethan, what is this? Come back so we can talk." Then, "Please don't do this. We can fix it." Finally, "Call me, I'm begging you." Each message was deleted without a response. That evening, sitting alone in my new living room, the burdens of the past began to lift. For the first time in ages, solitude didn't feel isolating. It felt liberating. The silence wasn't suffocating. It was empowering. When my phone vibrated again, it was Sophia. "Dad, what's going on?" "Mom's crying. Call me." I stared at the screen for a moment, then powered the phone off. They had taken me for granted, and now they would have to face the consequences of their actions without me. Over the weekend, I began rebuilding my life piece by piece. I changed my phone number, updated my address with the bank and my employer, and threw myself into work. Every small, mundane task felt like another step toward reclaiming my sense of self. Rebecca's betrayal had been a storm, but I had emerged on the other side, intact. With each passing day, I found myself looking forward, not back. For the first time in years, the future felt like it belonged to me. 3 years have passed since the day I left, walking away from the wreckage of my marriage and family. In that time, I rebuilt my life from the ground up. The pain of betrayal had become a driving force, fueling my determination. 6 months after the divorce, I launched my own consulting firm, pouring all my energy into its success. The results were beyond anything I could have imagined. Long hours evolved into lucrative contracts, and before long, I was advising Fortune 500 companies on growth strategies. The wealth I earned was reinvested with the same precision I'd used to dismantle my old life. I even transformed physically. Grueling mornings at the gym became a habit, and my reflection in the mirror revealed someone lean, confident, and entirely unrecognizable from the shattered man I once was. Despite my achievements, I kept my circle small. Trust was no longer a casual offering but a rare privilege. Whether in my personal or professional life, relationships were approached with meticulous caution. Life became quiet, deliberate, and wholly my own. But fate has a way of throwing unexpected challenges. One Thursday evening, I attended a gala hosted by a prestigious firm I had recently partnered with. The venue was stunning, chandeliers glittering above a sea of ambitious attendees. Standing at the bar with a glass of whiskey, I was lost in thought when a voice broke through the noise. "Quite the crowd tonight," the man said as he approached. I turned slightly, instantly recognizing him. Jacob. The photos I'd uncovered 3 years ago didn't do him justice. He looked older, the stress evident in his features, but the smug arrogance was still intact. He didn't recognize me. "Yeah, it's a good turnout," I replied evenly, focusing back on the bartender. Jacob ordered a drink and leaned casually against the bar. "You in finance?" he asked. "Consulting," I replied tersely. "Good money in that," he said with a knowing nod. I allowed myself a faint smile. "It can be." He gestured toward the entrance, where a valet parked a flashy red sports car. "See that? It's mine." I recognized it immediately. The same car from those damning photos. "Nice," I said coolly. "What do you drive?" he asked, clearly fishing for validation. "Something practical," I shrugged. He laughed, relishing his own extravagance. "Well, some of us like to enjoy life, you know." I turned to him slightly, my gaze sharpening. "Living a little must come with a hefty price tag," I said, my tone calm but cutting, especially when business isn't exactly booming. His confident smirk faltered. He blinked, studying me more closely. "What's that supposed to mean?" he asked, unease creeping into his voice. "Just something I heard," I replied, my words precise and pointed. News travels fast in these circles. Jacob's eyes narrowed, but he stayed quiet. I finished my whiskey and set the glass down. "Tell Rebecca I said hello," I said casually as I turned to leave. His face turned pale. "Wait," he stammered, the pieces finally falling into place. I didn't stop or look back. The evening unfolded in a blur of motion and calculated charm. I navigated the crowd with practiced confidence, exchanging pleasantries with clients and industry elites. On the surface, I was composed and assured, but my mind was a storm of thoughts. Running into Jacob was unexpected, but it didn't rattle me. If anything, it underscored how far I had climbed. By the time I left the gala and slipped into my reliable sedan, a profound sense of closure washed over me. Jacob no longer held any power over me, nor did Rebecca or Sophia. Their betrayals might have ignited my drive, but my success was mine alone. As I drove through the serene, empty streets, I let a genuine smile touch my lips. The past was truly behind me, and the future lay firmly within my grasp. For the first time in years, I felt a deep, abiding peace. The gala was alive with energy, the murmur of conversations weaving together with the gentle clinking of champagne flutes. The grand hall sparkled with elegance, its attendees wrapped in ambition and self-importance. In a perfectly tailored suit, I moved seamlessly through the crowd, offering polite nods, firm handshakes, and measured smiles. This world of posturing and performance had become second nature to me. Seeking a moment to breathe, I stepped onto the terrace and glanced down at the parking lot below. A striking red car caught my attention, its bold design impossible to ignore. It was a gaudy display of power and wealth that could only belong to Jacob. Even after all these years, his presence was unmistakable. He stood near the car, drink in hand, surrounded by a small crowd that hung on his every word. Seeing him stirred an unfamiliar feeling, not anger but satisfaction. The years had not been kind to him. The deep lines on his face told a story of struggles hidden behind his bravado. He was a faded version of the man I once knew, clinging to an image that no longer suited him. I returned to the bustling main hall, weaving through the crowd until I was close enough to hear his voice. "Success is about taking risks," Jacob proclaimed, his tone thick with arrogance. "Take my car, for example. It's not just a vehicle, it's a statement. People see it and know I'm the real deal." The group around him murmured in agreement. I stepped closer, my voice cutting through their chatter. "Quite the car you've got there," I said with a faint, amused smile. Jacob turned, his eyes scanning me before settling into a self-satisfied smirk. "Thanks," he replied, adjusting his stance. "Not everyone understands what it takes to own something like this. It costs more than most people earn in a lifetime." Feigning interest, I nodded. "Impressive. I imagine maintaining such appearances must be challenging, especially if the business side isn't as secure." His confident expression faltered briefly, uncertainty flickering across his face. "What are you implying?" he asked defensively. I shrugged with a casual air. "Oh, nothing, just something I've heard." His smile tightened as he scrutinized me more closely. "Do I know you?" he asked, suspicion coloring his tone. I leaned in slightly, enough to unsettle him. "Perhaps," I said, letting the silence linger. "Or maybe some people are simply unforgettable." His brow furrowed as he tried to place me, but I ended the charade before he could. "Give Rebecca my regards," I added, my tone calm but pointed, "and congratulations on the new addition to the family." His drink froze halfway to his lips, his face draining of color. "Wait," he stammered, but I was already walking away. I left the gala and stepped into the cool night air, handing my valet ticket to the attendant. Turning back briefly, I caught one last glimpse of Jacob. He stood rigid beside his car, his untouched drink clutched tightly in his hand. As my sedan arrived, I slid inside, replaying the encounter in my mind. Driving through the quiet streets, I couldn't suppress a smirk. The meeting hadn't been planned, but it felt destined. Seeing Jacob, stripped of the invincibility he once flaunted, reminded me how far I'd come. At a red light, I leaned back, savoring the memory of his stunned face. The pain they had caused me was a distant echo now, a healed scar. I was no longer the person they had underestimated. In the weeks that followed, the cracks in Jacob and Rebecca's polished image became impossible to ignore. At first, it was subtle, a missed payment here, a canceled vacation there. But soon, their world began to unravel. Jacob's business, the cornerstone of his ego, collapsed under the weight of mismanagement and reckless spending. I had seen it coming. The flashy car, the lavish dinners, the extravagant trips, they had all been funded on borrowed time. As creditors closed in, Jacob's attempts to salvage his empire proved futile. One day, as I scrolled through my phone, a news headline caught my eye. Local business owner declares bankruptcy amid financial scandal. The accompanying photo showed a haggard Jacob, a far cry from the polished figure he had once presented. The past had finally caught up with him. As for me, it was another reminder that I had left their chaos behind. I had built something real, something that would endure. I couldn't hold back a quiet chuckle. Karma has a remarkable way of striking with precision. Rebecca's life hadn't improved any more than mine had when she walked away. The man she left me for, Herb, who was supposed to be her upgrade, ended up being a downgrade in every conceivable way. That flashy sports car she loved to show off, repossessed. The grand house they'd moved into, sold off to settle their spiraling debts. Now, they were living in a modest apartment, a far cry from the luxury they had once flaunted. Sophia, accustomed to growing up in wealth, found the adjustment particularly harsh. Her entitled attitude isolated her from potential friends, and her school performance began to suffer under the weight of their financial struggles. The private school she once bragged about was replaced by a public one, and the resentment she harbored toward her parents was palpable. Meanwhile, my life was taking a turn for the better. That unexpected meeting with Jacob had provided me with the closure I hadn't realized I needed. It felt as though the universe had finally restored balance, granting me the chance to take charge of a brighter, more hopeful future. My consulting business thrived, unlocking doors to opportunities I'd only ever dreamed of. But the biggest change wasn't in my career, it was in my personal life. A year after the divorce, I crossed paths with Elizabeth at a networking event. She was everything Rebecca wasn't: intelligent, down-to-earth, and kind. There were no pretenses, no manipulative games, no hidden agendas. From the start, our connection felt genuine, and as we spent more time together, we built a relationship rooted in trust and mutual respect. Elizabeth embraced my past without judgment, and her warmth helped me rediscover parts of myself I thought I'd lost forever. Together, we created a life filled with laughter, exploration, and authenticity. One evening, as Elizabeth and I enjoyed dinner on the balcony of our new home, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen and froze. It was a message from Rebecca. "I know I don't deserve it, but can we talk? Please." Elizabeth noticed my hesitation. Is everything okay? She asked gently. It's Rebecca, I said, placing the phone down. She wants to talk. Elizabeth reached across the table and took my hand. What do you want to do? After a moment of thought, I shook my head. Nothing. She made her decisions and I'm not looking back. Elizabeth squeezed my hand, her expression supportive. You deserve peace, not old wounds. But Rebecca wasn't ready to let go. Over the next few weeks, her messages grew more desperate. She called, left voicemails, and even sent handwritten letters filled with apologies and pleas for forgiveness. I made a terrible mistake. I see it now. I was wrong to betray you. Please, just hear me out. I'll do anything to make it right. Her words fell on deaf ears. It was too late. Her last attempt came in the form of an unannounced visit. One afternoon, as I worked in my home office, the doorbell rang. Opening the door, I found a version of Rebecca I barely recognized. She looked exhausted, worn down by life's harsh realities. Can we talk? She asked, her voice trembling. I hesitated before stepping aside. You have 5 minutes. She entered, glancing around as though unsure of her welcome. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, she began, her eyes brimming with tears. But I needed to try. I've lost everything and it's all my fault. I destroyed the best thing I ever had. I leaned against my desk, my arms crossed. You're right. You don't deserve it. Her face crumpled, and she sank into a chair, tears streaming down her cheeks. I was selfish. I thought I wanted something more, but all I did was ruin everything good in my life. You were good to me, and I threw it away. I felt nothing. No anger, no pity, just an empty calm. You didn't just betray me, I said evenly. You betrayed our family. You taught Sophia to follow the same path. She broke into fresh sobs, covering her face with her hands. I know. I failed as a wife, as a mother. Sophia barely speaks to me now. I stood straight, my voice firm. Rebecca, I've moved on. I've built a happy life. What we had is over, and it's never coming back. Desperation flickered in her eyes. Please, just tell me there's a chance. I'll do anything. I shook my head. No, Rebecca. You made your choice, and now you have to live with it. For a moment, she sat in silence, the weight of my words settling over her. Finally, she stood, her movements slow and defeated. I'm sorry, she whispered before walking out the door. As I watched her leave, a profound sense of closure washed over me. That chapter of my life was done, and I had no intention of revisiting it. Later that evening, as Elizabeth and I sat by the fireplace, she leaned into me, her presence a comforting reminder of how far I had come. You okay? She asked softly. I nodded, wrapping my arm around her. Yeah, I'm better than okay. For the first time in years, I felt completely in sync with my surroundings. It was better than just okay. It was liberating. A sense of pure, unfiltered freedom coursed through me. Morning sunlight streamed through the windows of my new home, spreading across the polished hardwood floors in golden patterns. Outside, the crispness of autumn filled the air, carrying a subtle chill that contrasted with the comforting warmth of the coffee cup nestled in my hands. Leaning against the balcony railing, I watched leaves, ablaze in fiery hues, drift lazily from the trees. Their quiet descent was a poignant reminder of the inevitability of change and its understated beauty. The journey that had brought me here had been far from smooth. Looking back, the betrayals felt like relics of a life I had gladly left behind. Rebecca's duplicity, Sophia's arrogance, Jacob's selfishness, all of it belonged to a toxic chapter that had slowly suffocated me without my realizing it. The fractures in those relationships had obliterated the illusion of stability I clung to, leaving me in ruins. Yet from that wreckage emerged a profound clarity, a clarity I hadn't known I needed. Elizabeth joined me on the balcony, her calm presence grounding me. She held her own steaming mug of coffee, the wisps of vapor curling upward, a silent companion to the cool morning air. Deep in thought again? She asked with a knowing smile, leaning beside me. Just reflecting, I said. Good memories or bad ones? A mix, but mostly good now, I replied honestly. She nodded, her understanding quiet but powerful. Elizabeth had a way of giving my thoughts room to breathe, never pressing for explanations. It was a quality I valued deeply, her patient, unwavering support. The buzz of my phone on the patio table pulled me from my thoughts. A notification from an old acquaintance caught my eye. Against my better judgment, I tapped on it and was met with a forwarded article. The headline read, "Jacob Ramirez, former business tycoon, under investigation for fraud amid bankruptcy scandal." A dry chuckle escaped me as I skimmed the details. The piece chronicled Jacob's fall, embezzlement charges, mounting lawsuits, and a public disgrace that had turned his once dazzling reputation into a cautionary tale. The man who had thrived on his wealth and ostentation was now a symbol of downfall. "Another blast from the past?" Elizabeth asked, noticing my reaction. "Jacob," I said, holding out the phone for her to see. She glanced at the headline, raising an eyebrow. "Looks like karma found him." "It usually does," I replied with a shrug. That afternoon, as I strolled through the nearby park, my mind drifted to Sophia and Rebecca. Sophia had disappeared from my life after one final confrontation. I'd heard she'd dropped out of college, her once privileged world dismantled by the fallout of her family's collapse. Rebecca, on the other hand, had sent me a message months earlier. "I know you've moved on, but I wanted to say I'm sorry again. I hope you're happy." I felt no anger, only detachment. Rebecca's choices were hers alone, and whatever regret she now carried was her burden. They no longer had any hold on me. That evening, Elizabeth and I hosted a small gathering of close friends. The house brimmed with laughter and genuine warmth, a stark contrast to the shallow, transactional relationships of my past. As the night wound down and the last guest left, Elizabeth turned to me. "You seem lighter tonight," she observed, her gaze steady on mine. "I feel lighter," I admitted, pulling her into an embrace. Resting her head against my chest, she asked, "Do you think you'll ever completely let go of what happened?" "I already have," I said without hesitation. "Rebecca, Sophia, Jacob, they don't define me. The past shaped me, but it also set me free." Her soft smile was filled with understanding. "Then I'd say you've won." The next morning, I returned to the balcony, coffee in hand. The crisp autumn breeze brushed against my face as the first rays of sunlight illuminated the horizon. A thought struck me. I truly had won. Not in a vindictive sense, but in reclaiming a life that was mine alone. Rebecca and Jacob were left to navigate the chaos they had created. Sophia was coming to terms with a life stripped of entitlement. And me? I had peace, a career that fulfilled me, a partner who genuinely understood me, and a life that felt wholly authentic. I couldn't have asked for more. As the trees whispered in the wind and the sense of autumn filled the air, I raised my coffee mug in a silent toast. "To freedom," I murmured, a quiet smile tugging at my lips. For the first time in years, the past felt like nothing more than a faint echo. The future stretched before me, radiant and brimming with promise. My friend, and this is the end of the story. If you liked this story, then put your royal like and subscribe to the channel. May the force be with you.